Hello and welcome to Thursday Thoughts. Thursday Thoughts? What on earth are they, I hear you ask? Well, my friend Lucy and I meet every week over on Instagram to talk all things personal growth because she is as obsessed with it as I am. And we decided that we might as well put those conversations out as a weekly podcast. So now you can listen to us chat here on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll be talking about topics such as spirituality, limiting beliefs, the ego, imposter syndrome, gratitude, meditation, confidence, and so much more. So if you're ready, here we go. Today, we are talking about control. And we wanted to talk about control because, well, particularly for me, it's been something which has been coming up a lot recently because I have discovered that I love a little bit of control. I like to be in control. It makes me feel safe. It makes me feel like everything's okay. But actually, what I'm realizing is that it's sometimes we've just got to let go. There are certain things that we just can't control. And the more we try and kind of white knuckle and grip onto things, it actually can really not be that helpful and it can make you feel even more stressed. So that's where we were coming from. And actually, when we were talking on Monday, we were talking about Viktor Frankl. And actually, I found the quote from his book. His book from Man's Search for Meaning, which I think really sums up what we want to talk about. So he said in that book, we have absolutely no control over what happens to us in life, but what we have permanent control over is how we respond to those events. So there's very little really in life that we have control over, really and truly. But the thing which we do is our mind and how we think about things. No one ever can take that away from us. And I think when we realize that, it just kind of gives us a bit more kind of ease and freedom how we go through life. Because actually, if we can let go of all the other stuff and just worry about ourselves, then life feels a little bit better. I mean, there are obviously other things we can control to a certain extent in terms of, our health. We have choices how we eat. We have choices how we move. All those sorts of things. But it's good to notice those things which are supportive and can be, we have got control over the things that we haven't.
Exactly. It's so true. And like you just said, it's incredibly freeing when you really grasp this concept that pretty much the only thing that any of us have control over is how we think and how we respond. That is literally it. And although that's really terrifying in some ways, but when you sort of flip it, it's actually quite freeing because the thing is, if you think about how much energy we waste worrying, being annoyed by, getting wound up by things and people that we cannot control, it's kind of the definition of insanity. And I'm as bad as anyone else. Let me just add that in right now. But I think, as you and I always go back to, it always, always, always starts with an awareness. And actually, I think I said on our Monday live that we lost, is that it would be quite an interesting exercise if everybody could just go, right, do you know what, today I'm going to go through this day and I'm going to be really mindful of the things that I have control over and the things that I don't. And I think we would shock ourselves if we actually went through a day thinking, well, what is in my control in this situation? And another thing I mentioned on Monday was that the Stoics, who I'm really into Stoicism, and one of them, the main sort of philosophies of Stoicism is exactly this, that we only have control over ourselves and our reactions. And when you start to really live with that in mind, it just frees your energy up, because you stop getting wound up by annoying people or stupid people, or people who are being however they're being, the way that people can be. If we go around the world and we allow ourselves to, for example, let's just say that we're sitting in a restaurant and there is somebody on the table next to us talking really loudly on his phone. I say his, I don't know why, his or her. Either we can allow that to really piss us off. I mean, yes, you could argue that you could, it's in control, that you could say something to him, but putting that aside, the point that we're trying to make here is that we have a choice in that situation as to how we respond. So either we can let something like that really, really, really get to us and it could ruin our meal, or we can understand that that's not in our control, and there are always going to be people who trigger us, who wind us up the wrong way. That's just that. And I think that's one of the main things about this, because often when we're talking about what's in our control or isn't, we are talking often about people, the people that, people in our lives, people not in our lives, people who we just come into contact with. And one of the things that I think can be really good to remind ourselves of is when people are doing things that are potentially annoying or triggering or making us angry or winding us up, if we just say to ourselves, hang on a minute, I'm pretty damn sure I've done that exact same thing before myself. It's that thing of like common humanity, like we all fuck up, we are all annoying, and we are all rude, and we can all be this and we can all be that. So I think that's one way of sort of thinking about it. And actually, going back to the Viktor Frankl quote, basically we have to remind ourselves that in any given situation, it's actually about our interpretation of the situation. Like, things are just kind of neutral. We assign meaning to things. So, back to the guy on his mobile phone speaking really loudly. Well, we're assigning meaning to that. And we can choose to assign the meaning of, oh my God, that guy's doing my head in and I can't think straight. Oh yeah, Blue's just said, let them. About the Mel Robbins thing. Thanks, babe. That's my niece there coming in with the Mel Robbins theory, let them. But yeah, so either we can choose to assign that kind of meaning to it, or we can assign meaning to it, which is, I'm not going to let that ruin my meal. There's nothing I can do about it. We're always going to come across annoying people in life. People are always going to do things that trigger me and upset me. But how much of my energy am I actually going to expend worrying and thinking about this person? And speaking about worrying, that's another thing that we all do, myself included, big time. There's a saying which is, don't quote me on this, but it's something like, worry is a prayer, is praying for something that you don't want. Worry is a prayer for something that you don't want. And how often do we find ourselves expending so much of our energy worrying about things that haven't actually happened yet, and most likely probably won't actually happen at all? And so that's another choice that we have to make. Are we going to, we don't have control over the thing that we're worrying about more often than not. So are we going to allow it to stay with us for a day or a week or a month? Or are we just going to go, you know what, this is out of my control, and therefore I'm going to let it go? And I know that it is easier said than done, but it's almost like you have to remind yourself of this every day. And so many of these things that you and I talk about, they are practices that we need to remind ourselves of every single day. And as you know, and anyone who listens to my podcast will know, I put reminders on my phone. So I have reminders that come up on my phone multiple times, like literally like every hour of the day. I get some reminder, whether it's reminding me to check in with how I'm feeling or what I'm thinking about, whatever it may be. Because we need those reminders, because otherwise we just go back to that autopilot that most of us live in most of the time.
Yeah.
And the only way to prevent that is to practice and practice and practice. And the way to practice is to remind yourself that you have to do it in the first place, because otherwise it's so easy just to go back into zombie mode and go back onto autopilot and forget that we don't have control over very much at all.
I mean, I can think of numerous occasions where I have just spent hours and hours worrying about the future, worrying about my kids, worrying about the fact that I'm going to be late because I'm sitting in a traffic jam. So much time wasted worrying about things which really are completely out of my control. But I just want to say that, again, I'm not perfect at all. I still do. I still worry a lot. I've always just naturally been a worrier. However, through this work, through this constant awareness and this constant reminding to check in with how I am thinking, it's quite amazing how it can transform the way you see these things. And I've really noticed it recently. There's been a few occasions, well, quite a lot of occasions, where I just surprise myself. I just can step back and actually detach from that situation, which could potentially be something really triggering. Like when I had last week, when I had water pouring through two of my ceilings in my house, the tap had been left on overnight. The whole of the bathroom flooded. It came down through two ceilings, and although it was stressful, it was really stressful. At that point, that I realised there was absolutely nothing I could have done about it. So all I could do was mop it up and sort it out. I could have easily have spent hours ruminating on, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. Why did I leave the tap on? Why did I not do this? I can't believe I did that. Oh my gosh, the damage is going to be really terrible. I could worry about all of those things. And I totally surprised myself that I just got on, cleared it up, and I kind of let it go, because I realised I can only do so much, that I can only control so much. It's like, right, I can phone up the insurance company, see if I can get the money back on the repairs. So you just go through the actions, through the steps that you can do. It's like, what is within my control in this situation? And you figure it out, write down what you can do, and then you can action those points. And actually, I think that's quite a good strategy, is actually almost, if you have got a big situation which you find you are ruminating on, and you don't know, you just find you're stuck in it and it's whirling around, literally write down a list, 2 columns. What can I control? What is out of my control? And you'll be so surprised that those things that you can control will make you feel good, because you can go through those, tick them off. But the things you can't control, then you can just let them go. And I am really learning this, because I have tried throughout my life to control so much, namely my children, because as a parent, you want your children to, be happy and wonderful and do all the things and work really hard and do really well in school. And then I've realised, they have their own mind. The older they have their own mind, I can't make them do stuff, particularly when it comes to things like schoolwork. And, they have to make their own mistakes. And I've really learned that I can't control them. And I think as parents, it's very easy to go, particularly down that road of going, right, I've got to make sure they do this, that, other. And it is the most stressful thing. And that's when your relationships start to really suffer as well, because you're constantly fighting and battling. But again, when you can begin, it's not saying I don't care, but it's beginning to actually go, okay, do you know what? I'm just going to let them make their own mistakes. It's a massive shift in perspective. I can't control them. And it is, our relationships consequently are better. I feel less stressed out. Everything feels easier. And that, I think, can be applied to so many situations in life.
Totally. And going back, what you just said, you just said let them get on with it. And just going back to what Blue, my niece, said, the comment that she put, let them, which is a Mel Robbins talks about, and it's such a game changer. It really is, because if you just say to yourself, just let them. People are going to do what they're going to do. Like, you weren't invited to this thing, or that person lives their life in a way that you don't necessarily think is good for them, and you want to sort of try and, obviously we want to try and control the people we love if we see them doing something that we don't think is good for them. But actually, there's nothing we can do, because only people can only change themselves. We can't change other people, much as we might want to. And if you just say, just let them, it really, really, really helps, I find. And also the other thing I think is worth asking ourselves, because so many of the things that these kind of little daily irritations, let's say somebody in your office is being really annoying or did something to upset you. Well, it's done. There's nothing you can do about it. And actually, it is in your control how you choose to respond to that. So are you going to choose to talk about it to anyone who will listen for the rest of the day? And are you then going to get home and feel wound up about it all night? Or are you going to say to yourself, is this going to matter in a year? So often with these things, if just little things, like you were saying, your kind of flood thing, at the time, yes, a potentially really, really, really stressful situation. But like you said, you could have kind of ranted and raved and gone, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. And you could have let it piss you off for the next day or the next week and worried about this and worried about how much it's going to cost and all this stuff. Or you can say, is this actually going to matter in a year? And so many things that are out of our control, they're not going to matter in a year anyway. And going back to another thing that I mentioned, this very sort of morbid thing that I mentioned on when we talked about this on Monday, is memento mori, i.e., we're all going to be dead. And actually, that does sound really kind of really dark, but ultimately, how much of what we're worrying about controlling actually truly matters? It, is any of, none of this is lasting. So the things that we allow ourselves to get wound up about, and actually going back to one thing you said earlier on about like being stuck in traffic, and this is always such a great example. It's an absolute classic. You're stuck in a traffic jam, you're late, you're freaking out. And this used to be me big time in a traffic jam. Oh my God, like absolutely losing it. Oh my God, getting really angry and really wound up and just feeling worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. That is one road that you can go down, no pun intended, given that we're talking about cars and traffic. But you could also go, there's nothing I can do about this traffic jam that I am stuck in. Literally nothing. So either I'm going to sit here and wind myself up and feel worse and worse and worse, which is not going to help. And that's the key thing. It is not going to help. Winding ourselves up is never going to help. Or we can go, do you know what? Great. I've got half an hour extra to carry on listening to this really good podcast. And you can focus, you can move your focus onto that. And you can realize that that is something that you can control. The traffic jam is something that you have no control.
A very quick break to ask you to hit the follow or subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're enjoying this episode, I'd be super grateful if you could hit those stars and rate it too. Thank you. And don't get me wrong, it is hard to do that because I've done that. I did that recently when I was taking my daughter to netball. We were really, really late. The traffic was horrendous. She was getting stressed because we were going to be late. Doesn't like being late. I don't like being late. So I said to her, look, there is nothing we can do. So let's just listen to something on the radio. And actually, I found I was really having to take some deep breaths. And I was encouraging her to, because it's still, because I was so wired for stress in those moments, because that's how we are.
Yeah.
Actually, it feels initially really bloody uncomfortable. And so just being aware of that, I think, is good. And actually for me, taking some breaths, making sure my exhale is longer can really calm my nervous system and really help. But it's just having that awareness. And actually, the more and more I now do that and the more awareness I have, the easier it feels. It's a practice, like all these tools. You don't feel as stressed the more you do it. But initially, my God, it feels impossible because it's so against everything that we've done for however many years. But yes, it's just remembering that we always have a choice. Yeah. We have a choice, and that is one thing no one can take away from us. We have a choice how we react to these situations. And as always, it's just about becoming aware of how you're going to react. It's about having that moment to decide, okay, I can react like this or I can react like that. So in order to cultivate that awareness, as you know, what you said about reminders all the time is brilliant, to bring your mind back to where it's focusing on, just going, right, where is my attention at this moment? Is it worrying about, oh my goodness, I haven't got enough money for that, or oh my gosh, I said something so stupid and everyone's laughing at me, or whatever it is. It's like, actually, firstly, is that the truth? Is that helpful thought? No, you can stop yourself. And I would also say that taking time to get quiet with yourself is absolutely key. And although it feels sometimes that can be quite detached from these moments of stress, it is so helpful to build that metacognition, that ability to be able to step back and see the situation for what it is in that moment. So practices like meditation, like breath work, just getting silent, getting quiet with yourself, I truly believe are the absolute key to all of this.
I completely agree. I really, really do. Well, you know that already. And actually, just going back to, the only two things that we actually do have genuine, real control over always, which is the way that we think and the way that we respond. Actually, and this applies to meditation and breath work. It's if we are living that kind of in that sort of victim mode of things are happening to us, then we're just going to constantly be triggered all the time. Whereas when you have more of a tendency to go inwards and basically focus on what is going on inside of you, it just makes your life so much better. So rather than being outwardly focused, I would sort of encourage people to start getting a bit more inward focused, because when you make your priority just focusing on how you're being and how you're reacting and what you're doing, it's really interesting to see how the external things become less important. And I think that's something that both you and I have absolutely learned over the last few years. I certainly have, and that is a result of doing the inner work, because it all comes down to the freaking inner work. It's so true. But when you do start to be more inward focused, not in a kind of egotistical, selfish way, not like that at all, just in a very aware, mindful way. When you're looking inside and you're sort of sorting yourself out and you are working on yourself, then truly the external things really do start to affect you less. I've certainly found that. I've noticed that the more I've kind of really done that work internally, the less I get affected by things externally. It's quite incredible. And again, Christ, I am my billion miles away from perfect, but there's definitely a shift in me over the last 4 years of doing this, doing this in a way. There's a shift in the way that, and that doesn't mean I don't lose my temper. I still do. And in fact, we were talking about that on Monday, weren't we? I have always been quite feisty, and my family and friends would definitely agree with me on that. And I've, always been quite a feisty person who, I have a tendency to be quite sort of, is impetuous the right word? Is that the right word?
Yeah, that's stormy. Yes.
Yeah. And I can be quite like that, and I definitely can have a temper for sure, and I still do. But it's something that I have learned to control so much better, but not in a kind of intentional way. It's just that my temper's got less as I've done this work on myself. So again, we want to be going inwards more than we're going outwards, because when you do that, what is going on externally just becomes less important. And it's that concept, I think, which is actually really relevant to this conversation and really important. It's that idea that whatever is happening in the world, you're and this, aside from something really huge or tragic, and I'm not talking about anything major, I'm just talking about day-to-day life. It's that sort of concept of, when you are sorted in yourself, then whatever else is going on outside of you, it kind of doesn't matter. And that doesn't mean that things aren't going to affect you. It doesn't mean that things aren't going to irritate you or piss you off. But when you have a core, that sort of core part of you that is in control of yourself. And going back to Viktor Frankl, the only thing that people can't take away from us is what is going on in our minds.
Yeah. And it's so true. When you're feeling, you've got your center, you're feeling like grounded, and you're feeling really like things around you are not going to affect you perhaps in the way they would. And I know if I haven't done the kind of inner work for a while, then I do feel a bit untethered, and I do start to react in ways I don't really want to.
Yeah.
What's really been such an interesting learning for me, though, is that when something in your external does trigger you, and I've learnt this off Sam Skelly, who I trained with for my breathwork facilitation, when something does trigger you, actually don't see it as a problem, see it as an opportunity, because actually just get curious about it. It's because 10 times out of 10, generally, it's actually triggering something in you, which is sort of almost like a little point to look at and going, oh, why is that triggering me so much? So say someone really annoys you, maybe someone you're working with, they're not pulling their weight or whatever that might be, and it really triggers you. Actually, rather than focusing your energy on them, on what you can't, on, you can't control their behavior, to mostly, actually look at yourself. Why is that triggering you? Maybe there's a part of you which is, you know, feeling a little bit like unloved from a long time ago, which it's kind of really triggered that little part of you. And actually it's about really noticing those parts of you and feeding those parts with compassion and love. And actually every time you do that, you're almost healing each of those little parts of you and realizing that, okay, I don't need to be triggered by that stuff. That is their stuff going on. Okay. So I really love that as a sort of a real reframe. It's like, if it's triggering you, rather than blame them, look inwards, look at why it might be triggering you, and just send yourself loads of love and compassion, because it's probably, a part of you which is feeling a little bit lost, or, it's all about belonging, feeling safe. These are our survival parts. And if something's triggering one of those parts, then that is going to make us feel a bit like and kind of want to react in a way that isn't very helpful.
Yeah, completely. No, you're so right. I mean, I think the moral of the story, as so often is the case in our conversations, is it comes back to taking that time every day to, like you say, get still and just have 10 minutes, 5 minutes of some kind of meditation practice or breathwork practice. Because when you do that over time, I mean, breathwork, as we know, can be sort of instantaneous. It can shift your energy, but these things over time, the cumulative effect, what it essentially does is allow you to respond to things rather than react. And we talked about this because it does, it does all come, so much of this comes back to the same few things, the same few concepts.
What we haven't mentioned, though, which is important, is that when we do get triggered by stuff, is not to push those feelings away, is actually to feel those feelings and let them be. Because I think that when you are faced with this, something which is really triggering you, actually, the sooner that you can feel it, the sooner it will pass.
Yeah.
So if you are in a traffic jam, for example, and you're getting really riled, we're saying, okay, just, ignore it. It's not about ignoring it. It's about noticing that feeling is there, and then making that choice. Let that feeling be there, because otherwise these feelings come out in other ways. We don't want to suppress them. We want them to kind of move through us. If that kind of, if that makes sense, we don't, because the more you suppress, they're just going to pop up elsewhere. So, and the way we could do that is just bringing your awareness to that feeling. Oh, isn't that, I'm a bit curious. That's a bit interesting. I'm feeling so angry and so annoying. I might just breathe through it, let it move through you, and then choose, right, I don't need to feel like that. I'm going to feel like this.
Totally. One other thing before we wrap up, Hal Elrod, who I'm a massive fan of, he wrote The Miracle Morning as a podcast. I love him to pieces, American guy. And Hal, or one of the things that he talks about a lot is when something happens that makes him angry or makes him upset or whatever it is, he allows himself a finite period of time to feel however he's going to feel about it. And I do think that's quite a good trick. It's like, okay, I'm going to allow myself to scream and shout, rant and rave for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But once I've done that, I'm going to move. If it's out of my control, I'm going to let it go after I've been really pissed off and upset or cried or whatever. I'm going to allow myself 5 or 10 minutes or whatever it is, whether it's, half an hour, it doesn't matter.
Love that. Well, emotions, there was some Harvard study that actually said emotions, if you don't attach a story to it, it's a story that we attach to it which makes us stuck in the emotion. Emotions in themselves only take 90 seconds to move through us. 90 seconds if you don't attach a story to it.
That's it. Can you just say that again, Polly? Because I think I'm fascinated.
Yes. So when we're feeling a feeling, if you don't attach a story to it, some sort of emotion, actually for that emotion, that wave to move through you, it takes 90 seconds. You just have to look at a very small child who falls over, hurts their knee, they cry, they need a cuddle, but then within literally 90 seconds, they could be absolutely fine again because they're not attaching a meaning to it. The moment everyone learns to attach a meaning, oh, this means I might be able to get some more attention, or this means this, or whatever, then we get stuck in that emotion, and that is when it stays. So actually having that awareness of being able to move through and detach the story, and that's what we always say in breathwork, when if you're feeling a feeling, don't get stuck in the story. Just let the emotion, whether that's sadness, whatever it is, just let it through, because then it will pass and then it's gone.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Well, what a brilliant thing to sort of end up on, because I think, that's really, really interesting. 90 seconds, that's all it takes.
I mean, obviously for some people it might take longer, but I think that's what they discovered is the average, it's possible. So yes.
All right, now are we back here tomorrow?
We're back here tomorrow because we've got to. Yes.
So for anyone who is watching this, we are coming back for a Thursday motivation, because basically we're trying to bank a few episodes. We're a bit flying by the seat of our pants. Well, I'm always flying by the seat of my pants, but we're trying to get some episodes done, rather than kind of go week to week. So we're going to be here tomorrow and then twice next week as well, aren't we? I think we're doing our usual Monday at 9 next week, and then we're also doing this time next Wednesday, 1:00 next Wednesday. So,
and just anybody who wants to, they can come to either our podcasts, and these will be Thursday Thoughts. You can find us everywhere.
I'll get rid of us.
All right, my love.
Morning.
All
right. Have a nice day. See you tomorrow. Bye, love.
All right. Bye.
Bye, love. Bye.